Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to have Dayna, a friend of mine from Calm the Chaos. And why I've asked Dayna to come and talk to us today is in our community, Dayna, we hear a lot from people about how do you manage unexpected behaviors, specifically in our yoga and mindfulness classes. And
Mm,
that might look like in our classrooms when we're trying to do something different and unique in terms of yoga mindfulness, but also in actual kids yoga classes that might be after school or on the weekends or in clubs, right? And so Dayna and I have connected over the years because we both have neurodiverse children. And so I really turned to her to talk to, what do we do? How do we work with these children in a way that's healthy and productive and kind for both of us so that
mhm.
it's not just the children, but also us as adults that we're looking after ourselves as well. So thank you so much for taking the time, Dayna. I'm so excited to have you here with us.
Well, I am so excited to be here. And as someone who is a parent and now helps parents around the world, and I was an educator for 12 years before all of that, this is near and dear to my heart. So I'm super excited.
Awesome. Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that. Tell us a little bit more about your background and what you
Yeah.
brought you to where you are
Yeah,
now.
so I'm a mom of three. I have an 18-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And before I became a parent, I was in the classroom for 12 years, inner city Chicago. I taught everything from preschool to first grade and in all different settings. And my favorite kids were the ones who were kind of like the loud ones, the busy ones, the ones that when they went to specials or they went to the extra classes, they were the ones that I was getting called to come check on and help. And before that, I was just growing up, figuring out life, and definitely didn't have it all figured out. I struggled to fit in growing up. So while I
Mm,
wasn't necessarily that kid, I was the one who got set in the hallway when I was younger because I wouldn't stop talking or I was super silly. I was constantly doing things that frustrated my elementary school teachers for sure. And so I kind of was that kid. I have taught that kid and now I am raising that kid. And so that's kind of what brought me to this is my oldest really struggled in school. And by second grade, it was just evident he wasn't going to fit in a traditional school setting. And so I decided to homeschool him to figure out how to help him
mm,
thrive. And through that, I figured out some things that work, not just for him, but for other families and other children who normally struggle or where traditional methods might not work.
yeah, I love that. And I remember, Dana, it reminds me, a few years ago, we were at a conference together and we were having one of these, click moments, right? And I remember you shared about your childhood and what it was like to be a kid. And I remember thinking that was actually opposite than my memory. And so one of the reasons I've had a hard time connecting with my daughter is that she's so different from me, right? She's definitely got my sensitivity and my anxiety, but the other behaviors are just so incredibly different. So it was lovely to hear your perspective also as a parent and thinking about like it's not just me and it's not my fault, right? And it's not because she's an only child, it's nothing about my parenting, right? But that they come to the world their own beings. And so I remember that moment of like, I just got to let it go. It's okay that her and I are totally different. And she chose me, chose our family for a reason. And I can still make it work. Right. And so
Yes.
I love that.
And I
Yeah.
think that's an important part is accepting the child we have in front of us, not the
Yeah.
child we hoped we have or the child
Yeah.
that we envisioned when we were going to have children, or if we're teaching the classroom we thought we were going to have or the experience we thought we were going to have. Really being able to say, okay, this is what I have. I can't change that. And so since
Right.
this is what I have, how do I best create a relationship and an environment where everyone can thrive?
Yeah, exactly. And also too, thinking about us as educators as well, right? Because in our community, there's a lot of educators and pediatric therapists as well as parents and caregivers. But we have to also remind ourselves, like from our parenting point of view, right? That, you know, it's challenging for us too as parents. So that behind every child, there are parents who are caregivers that are working their tails off,
Yes.
and they care about this kid and they're doing their best.
Yeah.
And there's that sense of peace there too, that we're all in it together. It takes a village. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
when we can remove like the blame or shame, or if it's
Yeah.
the teacher's fault or it's a parent's fault, or if they just didn't have
Right.
electronics, or if they just didn't have this, then everything would be better. I mean, collectively, we have to remember, especially as educators, that our kids went through a huge thing. Our entire world did, a few years ago, and we're still going to see ripple effects. Our body, our nervous system still believes that there is an imminent danger. It doesn't know that things have calmed down and things are safer around us. And so we're going to perceive, especially
Mhm.
children who have an immature nervous system, they're going to perceive danger, which means
Mhm.
they're going to act out in
Mhm.
really challenging behaviors when they're feeling unsafe, when they're feeling unseen, when they feel like they don't belong, when they feel some sort of threat that might not even be a real threat to you, but to them it feels very real.
Exactly. Yeah, let's talk about that again. So you run a large online community of parents and educators and caregivers working with children who are, how do we say, right? Out of the box, neurodiverse,
Yeah,
just think
I say that
differently.
they're
They're
just
beautiful the way they are. They're just,
absolutely.
yeah,
I call them
they're just,
challenging kids. It can be a
yeah,
little triggering because people think that I'm saying that the kid is quote unquote bad, but I actually believe challenge is a good thing.
yeah,
So I think that
right.
challenges push us to learn something different, try something new, push us beyond our comfort zone in every other aspect of life. Only when we attach it to a child is it somehow a bad thing.
Right.
And I've worked with enough of these parents. I have been that parent that when you ask them about their kid, if they had to describe their kid in one word, it's
Mm,
challenging, it's
right.
hard, it's
Yes.
difficult,
Yeah.
and it's they push me in all sorts of ways, good and bad. It's not always
Yeah.
fun, but it is a challenge. And it's not just their behavior that's a challenge. These are intense kids. These are
Yeah.
different thinkers. And yes, it is our neurodivergent kids, but it is also just kids, because
Yes.
not all kids are going to ever get not all kids are going to get a diagnosis, and not all kids are going to medically or psychologically
Yeah.
have like those labels that are attached to them, but yet they might still challenge us as teachers, as parents, as educators, as caregivers. And if we say, well, they don't have anything going on with them, and we dismiss it, well, that child's going to get lost. They're going to fall through the cracks, and then they're going to get blamed or shamed, or they're going to take on a label,
Yeah.
whether we like it or not. And we don't want them to take on the bossy, rude, manipulative,
Right.
bad label. We want them to realize they are exactly who they should be and who they need to be. But there are things that might need to get honed or tweaked, or some strategies they might need.
Exactly right. Let's look at that again. So, what are you hearing out in the world right now? What are you hearing are the major behavioral challenges, for example, that you're hearing?
I mean, I'm hearing so much from teachers since the pandemic that emotional regulation is a real struggle. And so that comes out as it seems like a kid is getting mad or angry at the drop of a hat. They're crying over small things. They are refusing, like just kind of digging their heels in and not doing the things that they're being asked to do. It might mean that they're struggling also with relationship stuff, social skills. So they're struggling with the touching in the personal space, and they're struggling with what words to use when they're frustrated, or what words to use when they just want to play or have connection. And also, I'm hearing a lot of just busyness, a lot of activeness. Kids need to move, kids need to stretch, they need to do these things, the exact thing that yoga should be helping. But at the same time, it could be something that they've just got so much energy or so many sensory needs that they're all over the place. And so those are kind of the categories that I'm hearing a lot from both parents that are struggling with their kids in school, and then educators who are saying, it's like so hard. What do I do?
Right. And I think that's so important too, to normalize it, that when you're talking about these challenges are across the board. And so
Yes.
often I hear kids or teachers, for example, or teachers saying, you know, I what do I do when a child is disruptive or doesn't want to participate or is rolling themselves up in the mats, right? The yoga mats, or is sitting in the corner. So I think by you saying this, right? Because you've got that kind of bird's eye view and you work with families and educators one-on-one, it's everywhere,
It
right?
is. And I was
It's
just talking
everywhere.
to like a mutual friend of ours, and I won't name names, but like we were on a trip together and he turned to me and he was like, "Oh, I just don't know what to do. Like, my daughter has such anxiety now that I never saw before, these fears, these worries that,
Right.
and need for control that we didn't see before." And there was this worry and concern from the parent. And I was able to say, I see a lot of parents, I see a lot of children, and I see them from around the world, all walks of life, all ages. And this is common, but we're led to believe as parents that it's not common and it feels isolating. We're
Mhm.
led to believe as educators that if we have that one kid, that it might be something we're doing wrong, that it might be something wrong with the kid. I see posts every single day in different communities that say, I think I'm failing my kid.
Right.
They've got these things going on. And it's like, number one, all of us need to know we're not failing. Like if we're
Yeah.
in a
Right.
community like yours and we're listening to this training, you're not failing. You're looking for support. You're trying to be the best that you can be. You're trying to show up the best you can be. So it's not that you're failing, but it also isn't that the child is broken. So the child doesn't need to be fixed. Nothing is wrong with the child, but you might need some new tools. And
Mm.
the thing is you probably innately have a lot of this inside of you. If you are a
Right.
yoga instructor, if you are a child therapist, a play therapist, you probably already have a lot of this innately inside of you. But with all the information coming at you, it's hard to sift through and know which steps to take. And so what I've found is kind of like these guide rails that you can
Mm.
use as you're moving through and navigating this journey, because it is going to be unique to you. It's going to be unique to each kid. Why one kid is rolling up in the mat is going to be very different than why another kid is rolling up in the mat. So just as an example, one yoga classroom might be really busy and loud and really fun, like a really fun place for most kids. However, for this one kid, it's way too overstimulating. And so they roll up in the mat, right? For another one, let's say it's the most calm, zen, amazing yoga classroom, and all the kids are engaged in doing this thing. However, there's a child who has social anxiety, who doesn't really like to be put on the spot, who struggles with their core strength, and they might be rolling up in the mat to avoid this thing that's really hard for them. So
Right.
I can't tell you exactly like this, the solutions for those are two very different solutions.
Right.
So the guide rails are more important to follow and say, okay, how can I apply this to this kid or to this situation?
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And my next thing is let's put it down to 3 top takeaways, right? So that
Okay.
people are like concrete, right? And you've already been mentioning some. So what would you say if you were to look at, okay, if everybody walk away from this chat with 3 top tips?
Yeah. So number one is that the behavior is not about you. I think that that's a super important reminder that we forget as educators, that we forget as parents, as adults. We take behavior very personally. So if we have a child not listening to us, it might trigger some of our unresolved trauma from our childhood of not being listened to, of not feeling heard or seen. And so just realizing that a child not listening to you, a child rolling themselves in their mat, a child running away from you is not against you. There's a song by Carly Simon,
Yeah.
and she says, you probably think this song is about you.
Yeah.
And the thing is, though, is like we take that behavior so seriously. And so if you can kind of play that song in your head and be like, okay, you probably think this meltdown's about you. You probably think this,
Yeah.
defiance is about you, but it's not. There's something else going on under the surface. It is a cue. It is a clue to what is going on under the surface. And you might not know what's going on, and that's okay. But just
Mm.
realizing that it is something else can give you empathy
Mhm.
for whatever's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a little nod to Mona Delahook for her book, Beyond Behaviors and The Whole Brain Child by, tell me, I just had a mind
Dan
blank.
Siegel and Tina.
Yes, great. Yeah, so that's great. Looking under. I love it. That's
Yeah.
so great. Wonderful. So thinking about, we love stories, right? We love stories. So tell us a story about maybe working with either something that you've experienced yourself or working with one of your
Okay.
community members. What's a story that someone was able to work with an unexpected behavior with a child and really turn that around?
Yeah. So one of the tips I shared one, but
Oh,
one of
right.
the tips I was going to share is that it's not ever what you're seeing either. There's
Yeah.
more to it. So we've already talked about that mindset, that perspective change, but also the understanding piece of being able to unravel it. A lot of times teachers are taught to look right before or right after and to look at why a behavior is happening. Maybe it's because they want to avoid something or they want to seek something, but that is such a limited view of what behavior actually is. And there's so many reasons why we do what we do. And so this spiral out idea is this, concept of if you had one of those wishing wells where you put a coin in and the coin goes around and around and it gets to the base. I like to think of the behavior as the epicenter of that spiral. And if you can think about stopping that penny before it goes down into the hole, if you try to stop it too late, you're just going to make it worse. If you try to stop it too early, it's a guessing game and you're not really it's not getting any momentum and you don't really know where it was headed in the first place. And so if we can zoom out, and this is not usually done in the moment, it's done afterwards, but if we can zoom out and really look at what happened and then what happened before that and what happened before that, and start looking at their interactions, not just what the kid did, but what did the teacher say? What did the teacher that dropped him off say to him? What did their friends say to them? What happened that morning at breakfast? And sometimes that takes collaboration from other people to find that out, but you can really start to see what is building up to that moment. And so one of the stories that I have is that there was this kid and he was really struggling in first grade. And actually, I think it was kindergarten. So he was really struggling in kindergarten, so much so that mom was getting calls to school every single day. He was getting kicked out by about 1 p.m. every day at school. And dad was ready to send him off to a, military academy at kindergarten. And mom was like, I don't want my kid to go away. Like, I want him to stay at home. And so I've got to get to the bottom of this. And so she used this spiral method to really get to the bottom of what was going on, even though she wasn't in the classroom. She started asking her son some probing questions. She started asking the school some probing questions. She said, I noticed that I'm getting calls at 1 every day. So there is a pattern here. You guys are saying that it's coming out of nowhere, but there's some sort of pattern here. And so can you tell me, what are you teaching at 1 o'clock? Oh, we're teaching writing. Okay. Can you tell me what you're doing before writing? Oh, we're doing this. Okay. Can you tell me what his behavior looks like during this? And he's like, oh, this is happening. Right. And so, okay. So it really gets bad around writing time. Yeah. Now that you say that, yes, it does. So, okay. Can we kind of walk through the last explosion that he had? Because this kid would throw things, hit things, kick. And a lot of times when I get reports from parents or teachers, the thing they tell me is, the headline, right? Like they'll tell me like, the kid hit, the kid kicked, or whatever, the kid got kicked out of school. But they're burying some of the other stuff. So a lot of times when we start to unravel, we can find out more and more. And so what happened is when you backed it all the way up, it was writing time and he would stand up and he would get really he would start kind of getting fidgety and the teacher would say, you need to sit down. And he would start roaming the classroom and the teacher would say, I need you to sit down. It's writing time. And then he would touch someone else's paper. And she was like, if you keep touching other people's papers, you're going to go to the principal's office. And after that, he would then start going around the classroom and he would start knocking things off the board. And she's like, you can't do that. It's time to sit down. It's time to do your work. Please stop touching my stuff. And at that point, he then starts throwing it at her because she's saying, I'm going to take you to the principal's office. You can't do this. Well, he knows when he goes to the principal's office, he gets called home or they get called home. When he gets home, dad's mad at him and then he gets in trouble at home. So he's like trying to avoid principal's office at all costs. So what caused him to get fidgety in the first place? It wasn't that he was going to the principal's office. He got fidgety in the first place because he struggles with writing.
Yeah.
He struggles to get his thoughts from his head to his paper. And so even though he's incredibly bright, he couldn't get his thoughts to his paper. And so when she recognized that, she was able to say, oh, when he gets fidgety and he stands up, instead of focusing on what's going to happen if he doesn't sit down, why don't we come up with a solution for what to do when he gets fidgety, or an alternative for his writing? Once they inserted a plan right there early on, the yelling stopped, the throwing stopped, the kicking stopped, the biting stopped, all the picking on other kids stopped, because he was getting his needs met early on in that spiral.
I love that. It reminds me, just even a few months ago in spring, I reached out to all my daughter's teachers in middle school, and very similar. And I said, how's it going? And the math teacher wrote back saying, she's mostly really great, except the afternoons when we're doing math. And because it changes the blocks, right? And I was like, oh yeah, I can imagine at the end of the day trying to do math, right? When you've got the challenges that she has, right? And she can't sit still and everything. So I'm like, yep, I can get that, right? Yeah, absolutely. One thing about that spiral thing I was thinking too, Dayna, is that I remember when my daughter was about 4 or 5, my therapist suggested this, right? Looking at the before and what was happening, whatever. I feel like now you were talking that over the years, it's just become ingrained in me, just right, always looking what's underneath, what are the behaviors, how she's feeling. But I also feel like in some ways it may have also backfired for me in the way that I'm also looking forward to, I kind of set up success situations in case of, right, to try and avoid any issues. So
I don't think that that's a problem, as long as you're also explaining those to her.
Right. But I think the impact though, I think for me, it's like the anxiety of like, okay, so for example, we're going overseas next week. So I can see, okay, she's going for a sleepover. She's going to be tired. It's a overnight flight. And then what are we going to do the next day? So I'm already starting to anticipate issues. You know what I mean? And so I think that's just saying this out loud. I have to notice my own, how I'm going to treat that situation and not just get myself in some anxious spiral. And it's okay if she has a meltdown when we're overseas,
Absolutely. But thinking it out is the important part, right? Like anticipating it and saying, oh my gosh, I think she's going to have a meltdown here. I think this might be hard for her here. Okay, what will we do when this happens? So, we're both in the online community. And when I put a product out into the world, we've had some interesting things happen. So in March of 2020, we had a big workshop, and it started on March 13th of 2020, which is the day that the United States shut down. And so it was like, and then the world shut down. And it was like, okay, so I've got a little bit of that like anxiety anytime we go into a promotion. And so now as a company, we actually say, what is the absolute worst that could happen?
Yeah.
And then we make a plan for it. And then we look at that plan and we said, well, why would we not do some of these things now, even though it hasn't happened? And that has been the feeling is totally normal. The worry is totally normal. Create a plan for it. And then you can let that worry go, because you have a plan if these worst case scenarios happen. But if you don't make that plan for it, then you are just waiting for the next shoe to drop. You are just walking on eggshells. You're always afraid that something else is going to happen. And that is no good place for you to be in, for her to be in, and for a teacher to be in. If you're always worried that there's going to be another meltdown or another disruption, you're on high alert. Your nervous system isn't going to be able to handle that. And so you're not going to be able to show up and be present and be that calm presence for them in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. All right. And we've got, now let's go to the third one, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that third one is what we just said. I mean, a lot of the question at the beginning was, how do you handle, how do you deal with, how do we do this? And I think the question really could be is, how do I show up when this happens, right? Because we can only control ourselves. And so especially yoga teachers, right? You know that, right? And so how can you access your calm presence? How can you do a body scan in the heat of the moment? Practice that where and almost do visualizations of a kid is disrupting your class, and you do this, visualization where your body language changes, because you might be nice and calm on the, on the outside, but yet your eyes and your mouth and your shoulders are not showing calm because you're frustrated because this child just interrupted your class again. And so coming up with a plan for yourself
Yeah.
that keeps you calm, that keeps you regulated, so that no matter what storm happens in the heat of the moment, you're able to kind of ride through it, be there and support your kids through it.
I couldn't agree with you more, Dayna. I think I would say that too. After 12 years of parenting, initially I was like a teacher, right? Just like you, thinking I'm going to read every book, I'm going to listen to every seminar. I was just like information gathering, like how do I best, raise this child in a way that it was just so unexpected. Her behaviors were so unexpected to me. And the thing I've learned is the most important thing is to calm myself first. And so that's the beauty of the yoga mindfulness practice and meditation over the years, is that I've been able to come to myself. I am not perfect by any means, but it has been, it's definitely been the best thing ever. And so before you go into something, or before I react to something, she knows now. She'll come up to me and she'll take both on my shoulders, say, Mom, it's time to take a deep breath. Even though she wants nothing to do with it herself,
Yes.
I'm like the yoga mom. She wants nothing, but she knows that for me, and because she won't let me out of her sight.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that that's the same thing when we're in a classroom. It's not like you can necessarily go out and take a deep breath and come back. I mean, you have to be doing that in the moment.
Yeah.
Every moment is, how do you access your center? How do you ground yourself? Can you take a couple of deep breaths before you come into the classroom and to start the day? So yeah, I'm with you 100%, right?
Yes.
Is our health and wellness is just as important.
Oh, it's so important. It's so important, because if we're depleted, then we can't access any of the logic, any of the thinking, any of the options that we have. And so we have to be the ones taking care of ourselves, so that when these challenging situations come up, we can get through them and then not try to fix them in the moment. Instead, afterwards, be able to connect, be able to collaborate and find solutions that are going to work for everyone.
Exactly. And I love that. And, coming with this filter, then seeing those disruptive behaviors is not about you. Like you said, it's not about you. Thinking about what's underneath the surface, what's happened before that, speaking to their teachers, if they've come from somewhere else, or parents, or the administration of your school, right? So who are they in this moment? And then connecting with them. And you're only really able to do that when you yourself are calm and organized, right? And so you can provide them the best possible guide. And as you say, that example of, they could be really triggered by this practice, and if you're having everyone in a circle, and if, for example, if you're gazing down at a candle and that's your beginning routine, that might be really hard for a child to just sit and be in their own mind and body and thoughts, right? So I love that. That's your kind of like filter coming through and seeing the good in every child.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love that. So what's next for you, Dayna? You're in the middle of a book launch, which is super exciting. Tell us a little more about that and what you're up to.
Exciting. Yeah, so I have a new book, Calm the Chaos, a fail-proof roadmap for parenting even the most challenging kids. And it walks you through the 5 stages of going from survival mode to thriving. And it's easily adaptable to classroom teachers and therapists and counselor settings and things like that. But it really just takes the core essence of how to have a good relationship, how to solve challenging situations and keep moving forward into these 4 essential ingredients. And then at each stage, it kind of builds these plans for you so that as you move forward, you can access this different information and the strategies. And it really is meant to, like I said earlier, be the guide rails for you, not to say, these are what things you're doing wrong. These are the things you're doing right, but instead to build off of what I already know you're doing amazingly and to help you find those things you're not giving yourself enough credit for, and then use your hard-won knowledge coupled with best practices to create a plan that works for you and your situation.
I love that. And also you were saying your eldest son is now 18, right? So this is work that can work for all ages. So this is not just your littles, your early childhood. It goes all the way up through teens, and probably when they're adult children also, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's been people who've read the book and gone through the methodology, the whole thing, have said this is not a framework for kids. It's a framework for life. And I truly believe it is. It is how I live my life. It's how I interact with humans. It's how I, interact with my husband and my partner.
I was just gonna say,
It's how I run my business and how we
Yeah.
interact in our team with our team members. And we do everything through these 4 essential ingredients. And if things are, what I say, like a storm, we start over at stage 1 and we kind of build up to the routine or the system that's needed. We don't start with the routine or system. We don't start with the strategies. We don't start with the problem solving. We start with, let's get everyone to safety. Let's get some time and energy. Let's get everybody kind of rebooted. And then let's make sure we have a plan to get through the roughest part. Then we can start getting ahead of it and we can start creating new systems. And it really is. I mean, I was talking with an author this morning and she wrote a book all on being stuck and the science behind being stuck. And what she was talking about, I was like, yeah, that's a lot of what we talk about in here is how to keep moving forward, how to get unstuck. And it really is a framework for interacting with other humans.
I love that. So what do you say to people who, I'm just thinking about, for a lot of us whose partners might not be on board with this framework, or if you're in a school where maybe the administration is not in agreement or whatever, how do you work through the framework sort of on your own without support from people around you?
So the first part, just the first 3 stages all work just on yourself anyway. So you don't need anyone else on board for that. So it's all about being able to stay calm, get yourself to a psychological safety and emotional safety, being able to get your own time and energy. And that's done with little 1-minute habits a day. And then the in the moment plan really is just how you show up in the heat of the moment when things are rough. And so those first 3 stages, you don't need anyone else to be on board with any certain kind of plan. What most people, when they say that they're not on board, is that there's a misunderstanding that we're allowing children to act like this or to behave in a certain way.
Right.
And that is stage 4 and stage 5, ahead of the moment and family success plan or classroom success plan. And that's about the systems. That's about the guiding and teaching and mentoring. And that's about the problem solving and the skill building. And so, if you help them realize that, look, I know it looks like I'm allowing them, but this is more how I show up in the heat of the moment. And we're still going to address this. We're going to create new plans. We're going to get ahead of this. We're going to create some solutions that actually address these challenges. And when we do that, we're able to do it when our kids have a foundation of trust and a foundation of safety and a foundation of a relationship, which is far more important than the rules and the boundaries and the structure that we try to start with. And so if someone is not quote unquote on board, I always suggest using one of these plans actually with them and saying, okay, I'm going to change my own perspective. Instead of saying they're not on board, I'm going to say they don't quite understand my perspective yet. Okay. Right. And I love using the word yet. They don't understand my perspective yet. Right. And so there's still a possibility. Connecting with them as another human, not connecting with them on this topic, because if this is already a tough topic, you're not going to really see eye to eye day one. And so connecting with a partner as just a partner, connecting with a co-teacher as a co-teacher. So that might mean like eating together for lunch, or that might mean sitting and listening to them, hearing about their backstory, hearing where they came from, what their beliefs are. And then that understanding point, I think, is so important. We start trying to jump to solutions without actually having the why behind it. And I believe that when you know the why, the how becomes easy. And so if you can get clear on the why, and if you both agree with the end result. So if the end result is we want kids who are mindful, who love themselves, who are community members, and they feel valued, and whatever that end result is, whatever that value is, well, now it's like, okay, well, when they're in my classroom, this is how I get them there. This is my vehicle to get them there. When they're in this classroom, they're using a different vehicle, and that's okay. And so you can now talk about, we're all going to the same destination. Our goal is the same. And then that empowerment piece would be creating a plan together, and an out of the box solution of when there may be a tap out system, or maybe a check-in system, or maybe a debrief after something goes wrong. And what are the small tweaks we can make, instead of it being all or nothing? I'm all in on your plan, or I'm all out on your plan.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you so much.
You're
so
welcome.
much. And I feel like we could talk for hours about this topic. We're both very passionate. So how do we find you online? If people want to buy the book, come to your website? How do we connect with you?
Yeah. So the best way to get the book is to go to calmthechaosbook.com. You can get a free chapter. And if you buy the book anywhere, you can put in your information and we'll give you all kinds of fun goodies to help you implement the book in your world. And then to find me online, the easiest place is just to go to any social channel that you love. And I'm at Calm the Chaos Parenting.
Beautiful. Thank you so much again, my dear. I really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time. Thank
This is
you.
wonderful.